So, in about a week from the recording of this, the vice presidential debate between Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's VP pick, and JD Vance, Donald Trump's VP pick, will commence. This is going to be an interesting debate that showcases both the politics and personalities of both men, along with giving voters a clear view on who their VP will be depending on who wins. And this is important, but something worth wondering is how much it's going to mean in the grand scheme of things. Vice presidential picks are obviously important because these are essentially who you'll have as president if for any reason Trump or Harris can't do the job anymore. But how much do voters place stock in that when casting their ballots? And I think the best way to measure that is looking into the VP picks of the winners of the past few presidential elections because a lot of the reasons as to why a VP pick is chosen by the candidate is because of the fact that they are basically a tool to excite a certain block of voters that you want coming out for you in the general. Donald Trump picked JD Vance this year because he wants to energize his base, essentially to have them be more excited for the type of politics that he's brought. It's not really an outreach, it's more of an energizer to the more MAGA part of the Republican Party, the more economic right wing populist section of the party. And that's what JD Vance brings to the table. He's also, in some ways, a mini Trump, being a venture capitalist, and ideally the heir apparent to the MAGA movement. And Tim Walz was picked by Kamala Harris mainly because A, he's a safe choice. He's not really a alienating politician to either side for the most part, and he also has a very popular record as governor. And for Kamala Harris, someone who is really seen as a question mark in terms of policy, she picked a good VP pick to obfuscate from that. Now, I'm not going to say which one was better. I'm not going to give an opinion of that, mainly because I've kind of gone into that before, and also because that's not really the topic of this video. The topic of this video is how much this mattered at the end of the day. And to understand that, it's worth taking a look at the other VP picks that have been picked in the past few election cycles. So let's start off with the objective reality that many VP picks of winning candidates have not been great. George H.W. Bush won the 1988 election, no thanks to his VP pick, Dan Quayle, who uh, is truly a quote machine, if truly a quote machine, and had a really embarrassing vice presidential debate moment, but he still won the election. Al Gore was Bill Clinton's pick when he won the election in 1992 and 1996, and I don't really think Al Gore really added much to the ticket. He was maybe a personality change from Bill Clinton to a degree. He was a lot more of a modest, humble guy who wasn't really exciting to people, whereas Bill Clinton, for his time, was seen as a more exciting politician, for a Democrat at least. They'd been losing for a while up to that point. So I guess that's what Al Gore added, but I don't really see any electoral benefits that Al Gore got. And 8 years later, we would kind of see that kind of aged well if you were thinking that in 1992. Now, as for George W. Bush, his vice president is, in my opinion, and I think it's probably a lot of other people's opinions, he was probably the worst vice president in American history. Was a huge architect for the Iraq War, which was a huge mistake. He was a huge, like hugely corrupt politician. And he really seemed very he came across as just pure evil. And I think that his presence did not do Bush favors, but Bush still won. So up until this point, you might notice these three vice presidents have not been the best picks. I don't think that they swayed voters. However, 2008 is where it gets a little bit different. Barack Obama picked Joe Biden to be his vice president, and Joe Biden was a I want to say he was a smart pick. Maybe there was someone better that Obama could have picked, but Biden was pretty much a good pick if you consider all the characteristics at the time. Biden was a relatively conservative Democrat senator. He had a very problematic history that would come forward later on in his presidential run. Um, and again, Barack Obama was the first African American president, so picking Joe Biden at the time, you could have said that was actually a really smart decision because it probably won over a lot of voters that maybe would have been skeptical to vote for Obama at the time because Joe Biden was on the ticket. So I think that Biden was a smart pick, but also I still don't know if Biden was the reason Obama won because the 2008 election was kind of decided by the fact that the economy crashed just weeks before the election. And, a good VP pick doesn't really influence that. Um, like, I think Obama would have just won the election no matter who he picked for vice president. Um, So up until this point, I think Biden's probably the only VP pick that you could say was a smart choice in any way. But again, it was other factors decided that election. 2016, Donald Trump picked Mike Pence. Now, at the time, at the time, many Democrats would not have wanted to admit this because if you're not a Republican, you would probably think Mike Pence is a terrible choice because he was a very homophobic governor, super evangelical Christian. But I think Mike Pence was actually a very smart choice for Donald Trump to pick. And the reason why I think Mike Pence was a smart choice for Trump was because Donald Trump won the nomination in 2016 with a group of voters of the Republican Party that was energetic, but it was not the entire base. It was entirely clear that the one group that did not vote for Trump in that primary were evangelical Christians. And there were a lot of reasons for that. The guy is from New York. He used to be a Democrat. He has a lot of other things that you can look at and think, yeah, as an evangelical, I kind of struggle with this guy. And I think that by picking Mike Pence, Donald Trump effectively reached out to a part of the base that he needed to win because again, both parties need their bases. I think he reached out to a part of his base that maybe would have been skeptical of him otherwise, which was a smart decision. And Mike Pence would also prove to be a relatively good debater. Though Hillary Clinton's VP pick Tim Kaine, I mean, the guy was, in my opinion, he was kind of annoying to listen to, so maybe it was that. But Mike Pence, he was a relatively, I don't want to say a safe choice because, again, maybe some independents could have been turned off by that, but he was a safe choice for a guy who was not a conventional conservative and risked at the time alienating a part of his coalition he would have needed to win. So Mike Pence was a good strategic pick by Trump, and he ended up winning. And then, of course, we have Joe Biden, and who did he pick? Um, Kamala Harris. Now, there's a lot of reasons to explain as to why Kamala Harris was not a good pick for Biden. I don't think she really won him any other voters. And the reason I say this is because anybody who was supporting Kamala Harris in the Democrat primary, because that's really why he picked her, she kind of embarrassed him in the first Democrat primary debate. I think that anybody that was supporting Kamala was very clearly going to vote for Biden once it came down to Biden versus Bernie at the end of the primary. And I don't think that she was a smart pick for him. In fact, I think that was in many ways very similar to Trump picking JD Vance now, in which Biden was really over-serving a coalition that was already for him to excite them, but he wasn't really winning over any voters with that pick. But when November came, Biden won the election. So if you notice, there's really only two smart VP picks in that line, which were Biden and Pence. And every other VP pick was they weren't really a smart pick, but they still became president. And what that basically indicates is that in the grand scheme of things, when voters turn out for you, you're not turning out because you're thinking of the VP pick. In fact, that's kind of second in mind. Biden wouldn't have been trailing in the polls all this year if voters would think, okay, well, he might be really old and can't talk, but let's say if he dies in the next year, then we get Kamala. I don't think voters think that way. Nobody, when they were voting for John F. Kennedy, was thinking, oh, if in a few years he's taking a car ride and something bad happens to him, then I get Lyndon B. Johnson. I don't think the average voter thinks like that. I think that when people vote, they vote for the two nominees. When people vote in the next few weeks, they're going to be thinking of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So, because of that, Tim Walz and JD Vance, I have opinions on them as to if they were a smart choice or not. But at the end of the day, the people that will decide their fate are the candidates on the top of their ticket. So if either candidate loses, I don't really think picking I don't really think their VP picks are the reason that they would have lost or the reason that they would have won. And because of that, I think that really what the VP pick means more than anything else, and this has been proven true quite a couple times in the last few election, and this election is a timely example for this, is will that person make it to be the nominee of their party in a future election? So JD Vance and Tim Walz will not decide their boss's fate, but their boss's fate will decide their future. So, with that in mind, let's have a interesting debate on October 1st, and hopefully I don't feel as nihilistic after watching it. Thanks for watching.